Howdy y'all, welcome back to Maverick Mods. Got a short midweek update here. Today I'm going to talk just a few minutes about the future of the Firebird project. As you know, I'm trying to bring a 1971 Pontiac Firebird back almost from the dead, at least from a massive pile of disassociated parts. So, over the last few weeks, I've had a pretty good amount of time to really take a look at what I've got to work with and kind of really dig through the massive pile of parts that we collected along with the car and everything that we brought back. What I have found is most of the parts that came with the car, frankly, a lot of them really aren't usable. They're not in that great a shape. There are some new parts. There's a lot of old parts there. I even found some parts look like maybe they came from a swap meet, and some of them I don't even think go to a Firebird. A lot of the other parts that came with it, especially some of the engine, I'm going to talk about the engine here in just a minute, but some of them really aren't suitable for this car. So for example, when we got the car, I guess you could call it the short block, although there was a set of heads bolted to the block. The short block, I wasn't real happy with the condition. Looks like it had been to a machine shop, had new cam bearings in it, but it had the original stock pistons in it, and the cylinders had never been honed. So regardless, using that engine means it needs a complete teardown, needs to go to the machine shop. Probably is going to need a fairly thorough refurbishment. A little bit more research on the heads kind of brought up an issue, I guess you could call it. We found the original heads that came with the car. They were two-barrel heads. We found the two-barrel intake. The carburetor was still with it. We elected not to bring those because there was another set of heads that were on the engine. And I'm going to profess my ignorance on the in-depths of some of the Pontiac performance parts now, because we did a quick search on those heads, ran the casting numbers, and the heads came off of I think it was a 1968 400 HO motor. Great. Unfortunately, a little bit more research found that those heads really are not compatible with a 350 short block. The reason being is, one, you lose quite a bit of chamber volume. I should say the chamber volume on the 400 heads is about 9 or so cc's larger. Therefore, you lose compression without going with a higher compression piston. The other problem is that if the valves themselves in those heads are too big for the bore diameter of the 350. So if you open the valves any more than 400 of an inch, the valves hit the cylinder walls. So the heads are not compatible with the short block. So we're kind of back to square one on that. We found a lot of inconsistencies like that throughout this entire build. So about a month ago or so, right about the time we really started digging into the project, I kind of had a wild hair idea that rather than doing a restoration on this car, let's start thinking resto-mod. And let me explain my reasoning for that. Doing a restoration these days involves a heck of a lot of time, and increasingly, especially these days, a lot more money than it used to. Parts are becoming hard to find. Some parts are unobtainium at this point. And there's some real world aspects that doing a full-on back to original or back to original style restoration, you're really doing yourself a disservice. Now I know that there's going to be a lot of haters out there. Oh my, you are going to ruin this car. Well, okay, fine. If that's what you think, great. But here's my thought. Our expectations of what we want out of a car these days is vastly different than what we expected out of a car even 20 years ago, a lot more 30 years ago. And cars today bear almost no resemblance to cars 40 or 50 years ago as far as usability. What do I mean by that? back in the day, we were taught that you go out on a cold morning and this car A, you climb in, you've got to pump the gas 3 times, let it crank over 5 turns. If it doesn't start, then pump the gas 2 more times and then it'll start. The car sitting next to it, you pump it a pedal and a half and the thing will fire right up. We don't expect our cars to be, I guess you could call, temperamental or cranky like that anymore. We want to get in, we want it to start every time, all the time. We want it to run. Where we have been conditioned to vehicles, A, that are no hassle anymore, B, we don't have to pamper. So what tends to happen is that our expectations of these cars has changed over the years. So an original restoration that has all of the original foibles with it tends to wind up becoming a garage queen because it's no fun. Therefore, why not bring a little bit of modern to the old car? And that's the whole concept of a resto-mod. My idea of a resto-mod is something that you enjoy driving, you want to take out of the garage, you want to drive it down the road, but at the same time, you expect it to act, perform, and drive more like a modern car. So, and that's what I want this Firebird to be. That's part 1 of my idea of doing a resto-mod. Part 2 on my idea of a resto-mod is what we have, especially after doing the research on the VIN number of the car. We have one of, frankly, 200 or 250,000 off the line, plain Jane Pontiac Firebird Esprit. There's nothing special about the car, other than the fact that nowadays it's a surviving 71 Pontiac Firebird. But back in the day, the car it was just one of hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands identical that came off the line. This car has no pedigree. If this was a 70 Z28 396 SS, or if this was a numbers matching 71 Trans Am 455, then I'd probably think twice about resto-modding the car because that's the pedigree. But just a plain Jane 71 Firebird, one of 2, identical 250,000, that's not enough of a pedigree. Oh yeah, so the last thing I want to touch on about doing a restoration, a resto mod, or just getting an old car back on the road is cost. And cost does factor in. Not even counting labor. Sometimes just doing a car like this is a labor of love. But one of the issues to really have to consider is parts have really, really gotten expensive. Parts for older cars are becoming hard to find sometimes. And in some cases, we've ran across a situation or two when I started looking into some of the parts I would need for doing a full restoration on the Firebird. The parts just flat don't exist. So at that point, you've got to kind of modify things anyway, or start hitting the flea markets, or start hunting through eBay and Facebook Marketplace looking for old parts. Now you've got a problem there of finding a serviceable and good old part. So all signs started pointing towards doing a resto mod. So the next question that came up, if I'm going to resto mod this Firebird, how am I going to do it? Well, my thought immediately turned to, let's find a donor car. And the next thought was, what donor car? And I started really doing some looking. And here's what we came up with. After a lot of searching, a couple of false starts, losing out on a couple, I managed to find a wrecked 2000 Z28 LS1 6-speed. Show you a quick walk around of that right now. And the donor Z28 in all its glory. As you can see, just a little fender bender. Disregard the S10 wheels and tires. We had to put those on just as temporaries to get it on off the trailer. The important part under the power barn, all intact. If you look at it from this side, it doesn't look too bad. Just a little offset. But the important part is what's under the hood. We have leaves, and under the leaves we've got an LS1 breathed on a little bit. I've got paperwork on this. LS6 intake, long tube headers. Pretty sure it's got a cam in it. I got to call the company and see which one. We're going to take just about as much from under the hood as we can and move it over to the Firebird. This will help make it a true resto-mod. So the LS1 up front, 6-speed, and we've got a good interior. I think we can use the seats. I'm going to reuse the center console. I'm going to try and reuse the dash and the instrument cluster. We're going to just see how much of this 2000 we can retrofit and put back in the 71 Firebird. Obviously the Z28 has seen better days. So the plan of action, I'm going to take literally as much as I can off that Z28 and adapt it to the Firebird. We're going to make as much of a, within the 20-year-old donor car, modern version of a 71 Firebird. So the idea is drop the LS6, or excuse me, LS1, 6-speed into the car. I'm going to adapt the rear end. I'm going to adapt 4-wheel disc brakes, do some upgrades and modernizations of front suspension. I'm going to adapt the air conditioning components. We're going to take the seats, center console. I'm even going to try and adapt the instrument cluster and possibly even the dash and steering column over to the Firebird. Hopefully I can get that to work. So over the next couple of weeks, what you're going to see in the episodes is some of the work is going to be continuing on the Firebird, and some of the work is going to be stripping this Z28 down and getting all the parts that we need off of it. In the end, once the Z28 is stripped down, I will scrap it, which is where it was destined to go in the first place. So that I don't feel bad about that. I would feel bad about stripping and then scrapping a perfectly functional car, especially early 2000s Camaro Z28. But in this case, it's the best possible outcome. So stay tuned. I am going to split some of the work. You'll see a little bit of Firebird work, a little bit of Z28 work, at least tearing the Z28 down until I get that done. And then I can concentrate once again on the Firebird. So stay tuned. Again, I'm having fun doing this, and I hope you have some fun watching along with me. Please like, share, and subscribe. It sure does help me out. And everybody, see you the next time.